a daily 30-minute program from the Voice of America. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak. This program is designed for English learners, so we speak a little slower, and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English.
On today's program, you will hear stories from John Russell and Faith Perlow. Later, Brian Lynn presents this week's Science Report. Finally, Andrew Smith and Jill Robbins bring us today's Lesson of the Day. But first, here is John Russell.
Archaeologists have found a group of lost cities in the Amazon rainforest. The cities were home to at least 10,000 farmers around 2,000 years ago. Stéphane Rostand first noticed the earthen mounds and buried roads in Ecuador more than 20 years ago. But at the time, I wasn't sure how it all fit together, said Rostand. He was one of the researchers who reported on the findings in the publication Science. Recent mapping using laser technology revealed those locations to be part of a group of settlements and connecting roads. The settlements are in the forested areas near the Andes Mountains. It was a lost valley of cities, said Rostand, who directs investigations at France's National Center for Scientific Research. It's incredible, he added. The Upano people lived in the settlements between around 500 BC and 300 to 600 AD. That was around the same time period as the Roman Empire in Europe, the researchers found. Ancient people built on over 6,000 earthen mounds in an area surrounded by agricultural fields with drainage canals. The largest roads were 10 meters wide and went for 10 to 20 kilometers. While it is difficult to estimate populations, the area was home to at least 10,000 people, and possibly about 15,000 or 30,000 at its highest point, said Antoine Dorisson, a study co-writer. That is comparable to the estimated population of Roman-era London, then Britain's largest city. This shows a very dense occupation and an extremely complicated society, said Michael Heckenberger of the University of Florida. He was not involved in the study. Jose Iriarte of the University of Exeter was also not involved in the study. He said it would have required a complex system of organized labor to build the roads and thousands of earthen mounds. Iriarte said, the Incas and Mayans built with stone, but people in Amazonia didn't usually have stone available to build. They built with mud. The Amazon is often thought of as a wild area with only small groups of people. But recent discoveries have shown us how much more complex the past really is, he added. Scientists have recently also found evidence of complex rainforest societies that came before European contact elsewhere in the Amazon, including in Bolivia and Brazil. There's always been an incredible diversity of people and settlements in the Amazon, not only one way to live, said Rostand. We're just learning more about them. I'm John Russell.
Are you interested in food, United States history, and the English language? If so, American cookbooks provide wide information in all 3 subjects. The first, published in 1796, started a market that continues in the 21st century, with online publications of such works. And the literature offers more than just recipes. Megan Elias is the Director of Food Studies at Boston University and the writer of Food on the Page, Cookbooks and American Culture. She says that cookbooks do help teach us how to prepare food, but they provide more than that, too. The concept of meals. How many meals a day that people expect to eat? What do they expect to have in those meals? Elias said. They also inform readers about discoveries, equipment, and technology related to food making. Elias said, "What are the objects that are necessary to make the things and what exists? So, are you being asked to do something over an open fire? Or are you being asked to use an electric stove? Is it something that can be done in the microwave? If you see a lot of recipes for things that are preserved for pickles, you know that you are looking at a time without refrigeration." Amy Bentley is a food historian at New York University. She said that cookbooks from the 1800s were used as lifestyle and household guides. They include food recipes, but they were not central to the books back then. So there's some recipes for food, but it could be recipes for a cleaning solvent, or what to do when your child has been poisoned, how to clean, how to get stains out, Bentley said. American Cookery by Amelia Simmons is the first cookbook published in the United States. Simmons wrote that her goal with the book was to improve the new generation of women in the U.S. Megan Elias says that after the Civil War, cookbooks became more diverse. Writers started exploring local foods and customs in their work. Elias said that Southern cookbooks tried to offer a beautiful version of the Old South that will kind of heal over the wounds of the Civil War rather than dealing with the problems that caused the Civil War to begin with. Some communities would put together a group cookbook to raise money. These cookbooks provide a look into what the American middle class was eating throughout the years. Such works serve as a record of the traditions and interests of different neighborhoods and groups. Throughout the years, cookbooks have signified humanity's growth in knowledge, trends, and innovations. During the last part of the 19th century, for example, many recipes were informed by the dangers of food containing bacteria. Then, in the 1930s, refrigerators became common objects in American homes. The threat of bacterial infection from food dropped, and very soon, cooks adapted to the new conditions. New recipes and new cookbooks resulted. I am Faith Perlow.
The American Space Agency, NASA, is preparing to test a new supersonic airplane that could help establish a new generation of superfast aircraft. The new aircraft is called X-59, and it was built in partnership with American defense contractor Lockheed Martin. The experimental plane is part of a NASA project or mission called Quest. The mission aims to collect data in the United States on the level of noise produced by supersonic travel. Supersonic describes a vehicle that travels faster than the speed of sound, about 1,235 kilometers an hour. The data Quest gathers could lead U.S. officials to change rules that currently ban supersonic flights over land. NASA says the X-59 was developed to reduce the loudness of the sonic boom it produces when breaking the sound barrier to very low levels heard on the ground. A few U.S. companies are exploring ways to restart supersonic passenger travel for the first time since 2003. That is the year the Concorde aircraft stopped flying. The Concorde was the world's first supersonic passenger jet. It was operated jointly by Britain and France. The Concorde flew at speeds more than twice the speed of sound, British Airways explained. This meant it could travel from London to New York in about 3.5 hours. The same flight took about 8 hours with normal passenger jets. The new supersonic planes being developed make less noise and use less fuel than the Concorde. But manufacturers are under pressure from environmental groups and airports to meet the same noise and carbon emission limits as traditional planes. NASA and Lockheed Martin recently showed off the X-59 plane during an event in Palmdale, California. At the ceremony, NASA Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy called the development of the supersonic aircraft a major accomplishment. She noted that members of the NASA and Lockheed Martin teams had worked hard to take the X-59 from an idea to reality in just a few years. Melroy added her hope that the X-59 will help change the way we travel, bringing us closer together in much less time. The aircraft measures 30 meters long and 9 meters wide. NASA said in a press release that the X-59 is expected to fly at 1.4 times the speed of sound, or about 1,500 kilometers per hour. The aircraft's design, shape, and technologies will permit it to reach high speeds while producing a quieter sonic thump, the agency explained. The X-59 has not yet completed a test flight, but NASA officials have said they expect that to happen sometime this year. The team will be carrying out other tests in the coming months, including instrument experiments, fast engine runs, and ground testing. Once the aircraft has been cleared to fly, it will be deployed to several cities across the U.S. to collect data on the sounds the plane produces and how people on the ground react to the noise. The data will be provided to the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration and international flight regulators. The information will help regulators decide whether to change existing laws restricting supersonic flight. NASA said one of the biggest differences between the X-59 and other supersonic planes is that it has a thinner, smaller nose. The nose, which was reduced by about 1/3, aims to break up shock waves that results in more intense sonic booms. The Quest team also designed the aircraft with its engine mounted on top and gave it a smooth underside in an effort to reduce shock waves near the back of the plane, NASA said. Another American company developing supersonic aircraft is Boom Supersonic in Colorado.
The company first showed off its experimental supersonic plane, the XB-1, in October 2020. Boom has been carrying out tests of the aircraft since then. The company says on its website that its development and testing activities during the past few years have centered on ground tests, including a series of taxi runs. In 2024, Boom said it plans to begin its high-speed taxi testing early in the year while preparing for an actual flight test that could happen later in the year. I'm Brian Lynn.
Brian Lynn joins me now to talk more about his science report. Thanks for being here, Brian.
Of course, Ashley. Thanks for having me.
This week, you explored some new efforts in the U.S. to develop supersonic aircraft. You note how these efforts could lead to big changes across the aviation industry. But what barriers do you think could slow or even block the current development?
Yes, this is certainly a possibility, and it may take years before supersonic flights become commonplace. But in researching the story, it became clear that there is already organized opposition to it. It's being led mainly by environmental groups that argue that supersonic aircraft use a lot more fuel than conventional planes, even though engines in general have become more energy efficient. And, of course, there's also opposition over the noise issue, which is what NASA will be closely investigating.
And how have the aircraft developers reacted so far to the opposition?
Well, mainly they have spoken to the issue of fuel, and one of the companies mentioned in the report, Boom Supersonic, has said they're building the planes to run on different fuel blends that will actually cause less harm to the environment than traditional aircraft. Of course, those claims still have to be proven in actual tests, but the developers of this kind of fuel, which is a biofuel, have said new versions of it could cut carbon pollution emissions by up to 80% compared to conventional fuels.
Okay, well, thanks again for being here today, Brian.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ashley.
Welcome to the lesson of the day on the Learning English podcast. My name is Andrew Smith.
And my name is Jill Robbins. Thanks for joining us. Today's lesson will help you learn more about the English you hear in our video series, Let's Learn English. The series shows Ana Mateo in her work and life in Washington, D.C. Here's Ana introducing herself.
Hello, my name is Ana Mateo.
Today's lesson talks about a special weather event, a blizzard. And our lesson will show how we use both the past perfect and the present perfect tenses when we talk about events.
Andrew, have you ever been in a blizzard?
I have, but it was a very long time ago. And I think we should explain what the word blizzard means.
Okay. A blizzard is a very strong snowstorm with a very strong wind. The wind blows the snow so much that it's difficult to see, and it can be dangerous to go outside.
Jill, I know that in January 2016, a strong blizzard hit Washington, D.C. Were you there, and did it affect you?
Yes, I was here, but I had fun. I had a niece visiting from Boston, where they usually have lots of snow. She was stuck with us for a few more days than she wanted to be. And that blizzard became the topic for Lesson 11 of Level 2 of Let's Learn English. The lesson is called The Big Snow. Let's listen to the beginning of the lesson. Kelly meets Anna, who is sitting and reading a book about the weather.
Hi, Anna. Why do you have all this weather stuff?
I love weather.
Me too. Weather is so important.
It is. It affects people's lives.
Have you ever reported on a big weather event?
I have. I've reported on a blizzard.
Do you mean the one last weekend?
Yes. I had been waiting for that blizzard for years. When it came, I was ready.
Many people like Anna get very excited about big weather events, such as blizzards. Anna also said that weather affects people's lives. And you might have noticed that I also asked Jill if the blizzard had affected her. Were you there, and did it affect you?
Let's talk about this verb, affect. It is spelled A-F-F-E-C-T. But even native speakers sometimes confuse this word with the noun effect. That word is spelled E-F-F-E-C-T.
The confusion happens because we often pronounce the two words the same way. When we are speaking quickly, the first vowel of the noun effect is reduced to the quick sound, affect, which is the same sound as the verb.
Andrew, that's our old friend, the schwa.
Yes, it is.
It makes so much trouble for English learners. To affect is to create a change or make someone feel a certain way. And the noun, the effect, is the result of something.
How did the blizzard affect Anna? And what were the effects of the blizzard on Washington, D.C.? We're going to find out. But first, listen to Anna and Kelly again. And this time, listen for the present perfect and past perfect continuous tenses.
Have you ever reported on a big weather event?
I have. I've reported on a blizzard.
Do you mean the one last weekend?
Yes. I had been waiting for that blizzard for years. When it came, I was ready.
Kelly and Anna use the present perfect when they say,
Have you ever reported on a big weather event?
I have. I've reported on a blizzard.
Anna uses the past perfect continuous when she says,
I had been waiting for that blizzard for years.
We use the present perfect tense to talk about an action in the past that is important in the present.
And what about the past perfect?
When one event in the past happens before another event in the past, we can use the past perfect tense to make this clear. We use the auxiliary verb had plus the past participle to show what happened first.
Before Anna reported on the blizzard, she had been waiting for a long time. Because waiting takes place over a period of time, we use the past participle been plus the ing form of the verb. This is called the past perfect continuous.
Now let's listen to more of the story about the blizzard. Anna got her friend Pete to help her do the news report on the blizzard. To do the report, they had to work on the weekend, and Anna brought supplies to help them.
Why am I here on a Saturday? Why are you carrying things? Why?
Pete, these are my supplies. Food, a blanket, warm clothing. Where are your supplies? Pete. This could be the blizzard of the century.
It'll be fine.
Pete brought almost no supplies with him. He didn't think the blizzard would have a big effect.
He was wrong. Let's listen to some of the effects of the blizzard and how it affected Anna and Pete. Anna continues to tell the story to Kelly. And be sure to listen for the present perfect and past perfect tenses.
The big snow broke all kinds of records, didn't it?
Yes, it did. And every time a record was broken, we celebrated.
So far in Washington, D.C., 29 inches of snow has fallen. That, my dear listeners, is a record! We just broke the wind speed record. Snow has been falling for 30 hours straight. That's another record!
By Saturday night, stores and restaurants had closed. Did you bring enough food?
I thought I had brought enough food, but I ran out. Hey, Pete, where's my bag of popcorn?
Maybe you ate it already?
No, I didn't.
I haven't seen it.
We had reported together for 48 hours straight.
Wow. That must have been a great team-building exercise for you and Pete.
Yeah, you could say that.
At the end, Pete has eaten all of Anna's popcorn. Anna gets mad, and in the video, they start to fight.
So that's one way the blizzard affected them. And did you hear the other effects of the storm? The storm broke all kinds of records.
To break a record means to surpass, and that's spelled S-U-R-P-A-S-S, or go beyond what had ever been done before. For example, in 2009, Usain Bolt ran the 100-meter race in 9.58 seconds. That broke the world record and is the fastest any person has ever run that distance.
And the blizzard in D.C. broke records for the most snow that has ever fallen in D.C. 29 inches, which is almost 74 centimeters. And it broke the record for the longest amount of time snow has ever fallen in D.C., about 30 hours.
I remember I had a stick in my backyard to measure the snow that time. Those are still records for D.C., so we say the storm broke the record for the most snow that has ever fallen. We use the present perfect tense because we are connecting that past event to a record that still stands.
When we say a record still stands, we mean the record has never been broken.
Blizzards do affect a lot of things, especially in a city like Washington, D.C., which rarely gets them.
And even a little bit of snow can affect Washington, D.C. a lot.
You've been listening to the Lesson of the Day on the Learning English podcast. Thanks for listening. Remember that you can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Jill Robbins.
And I'm Andrew Smith.
That's our program for today. Join us again tomorrow to keep learning English through stories from around the world. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan.
English, a daily 30-minute program from the Voice of America. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak. This program is designed for English learners, so we speak a little slower and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English.
On today's program, you will hear stories from Brian Lynn and Dan Friedel. Then Dan Novak presents this week's Health and Lifestyle Report. Finally, Andrew Smith and Jill Robbins bring us today's lesson of the day. But first, here is Brian Lynn.
Cameroon has begun the world's first major malaria vaccine program for children. The campaign launched Monday in the Central African nation. Health officials called the effort a major step in the fight against the disease across Africa. The continent accounts for about 95% of the world's malaria deaths. The World Health Organization, WHO, estimates the disease, which is spread through mosquitoes, kills more than 600,000 people a year. Most of the deaths involve young children. The vaccine, called RTS-S, was developed by British drug company GlaxoSmithKline, or GSK. It is meant to work with other preventive measures, such as the use of bed nets, to fight the disease. Cameroon is the first country to offer vaccine injections through a routine program after successful tests or trials were carried out in Ghana and Kenya. Cameroon hopes to vaccinate about 250,000 children this year and next. The International Vaccine Alliance, called Gavi, has said 19 other countries aim to launch their own campaigns this year. About 6.6 million children in those countries are to receive malaria vaccinations in 2024 and 2025. For a long time, we have been waiting for a day like this, said Mohammed Abdulaziz. He is with the African Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Abdulaziz spoke during a joint news briefing with the WHO, Gavi, and other organizations. Cameroon is using one of two recently approved malaria vaccines called Mosquirix. When the WHO approved the vaccine 2 years ago, officials admitted it was not perfect, but they noted its use could sharply reduce severe infections and hospitalizations. The GSK-produced shot is only about 30% effective. It requires 4 shots or doses. Tests have shown the vaccine's protection begins to weaken after several months. GSK has said it can only produce about 15 million doses of Mosquirix a year. Some experts believe a second malaria vaccine, developed by Oxford University and approved by the WHO in October, may be a better solution. That vaccine, called R21, is less costly and only requires 3 doses. Launching the second vaccine is expected to result in enough vaccine supply to meet the high demand and reach millions more children, said Kate O'Brien. She is the WHO's Director of Vaccinations. Having 2 vaccines for malaria will help to close the huge gap between demand and supply and could save tens of thousands of young lives, especially in Africa, said WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus. India's Serum Institute, which helped develop the R21 vaccine, has said it could produce up to 200 million doses of it a year. Gavi has said that vaccine could be launched in May or June. Some experts have raised questions about the long-term effectiveness of the vaccines. They have questioned whether attention and financing should be drawn away from the wider fight against the disease using established prevention methods. But health experts at the news conference said the new vaccine launch included community efforts aimed at supporting the campaign. Officials advised individuals on vaccine safety and have urged them to continue to use existing protective methods alongside the vaccines. I'm Brian Lynn.
Enoch Twagirayesu was seeking safety when he and his family fled violence in Burundi more than 10 years ago. They found it in Uganda. The small East African nation has taken in thousands of refugees from neighboring countries. Twagirayesu and his family live in Nakivale refugee settlement near the Tanzanian border. There were 2 children in his family when they arrived in Uganda. Today, there are 8 children. Growing families like his and the arrival of new refugees have put pressure on the land that makes up the settlement. 20 years ago, the area was a thick forest. Today, the trees are mostly gone. They have been cut down for cooking fuel. When Twagirayesu saw women digging up roots to burn a few years ago, he knew it was time to act. When the trees are finished, we will also be finished, Twagirayesu said. Because if there are no trees to be used for cooking, even the people cannot survive. Twagirayesu and 2 other refugees began planting trees in 2016. That early group quickly grew. Twagirayesu now leads the Nakivale Green Environment Association. Its members carry out what Twagirayesu calls the urgent business of reforesting. Nakivale is the oldest refugee settlement in Africa. It has about 180,000 refugees. Some are from Burundi, while others are from Congo and Rwanda. New people come all the time. Once the refugees register with Uganda, they are granted a small piece of land on which they can live. They can build small homes and plant gardens. Nsamizi Training Institute for Social Development is a local organization. It is supporting the tree planting activities of Twagirayesu and others. The Institute's yearly goal is to plant 300,000 trees. On a recent afternoon, a group of refugees planted baby pine trees on a hill above a school. One of the school's teachers said she hopes the tree planting project reduces the amount of water that runs off from rains. If it rains too much, the water floods the schoolyard, and students are forced to stay inside. Twagirayesu said the group has planted at least 460,000 trees in Nakivale. The trees are pine, acacia, and bamboo. The refugees who plant the trees say being able to walk under the tree cover provides them peace, but they also worry officials may one day want to send them home. They believe Ugandan officials may seek to protect the new trees and remove the people from the land. But for now, Twagirayesu says, when we are walking in the places where we planted trees, we feel much happiness. I'm Dan Friedel.
A large U.S. study found no evidence that taking Ozempic or Wegovy is tied to an increase in suicidal thoughts, researchers reported recently. Both Ozempic for type 2 diabetes and the obesity treatment Wegovy have the same active ingredient, semaglutide. The analysis included electronic medical record data from more than 1.8 million patients. Researchers actually found a lower risk of new and recurring suicidal thoughts in those taking semaglutide compared to those using other medications for weight loss or diabetes. Semaglutide belongs to a class of drugs known as GLP-1 agonists, which were designed to treat type 2 diabetes. In addition to helping control blood sugar levels, the drugs produce a feeling of fullness. Concerns over reports of suicidal ideation connected with semaglutide led to an investigation by the European Medicines Agency. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, has listed suicidal ideation as a possible safety concern for GLP-1 drugs. A Reuters examination last year found that the FDA had received 265 reports of suicidal thoughts or behavior in patients taking semaglutide or similar medicines since 2010. 36 of those reports describe a death by suicide or suspected suicide. Such events do not prove a connection between a drug and a side effect, but they can signal to officials a need to study a specific risk. The study appeared online in the journal Nature. It was funded by the U.S. National Institutes of Health. The researchers examined data on 240,258 U.S. patients prescribed Wegovy or other medications for weight loss, and nearly 1.6 million with type 2 diabetes prescribed Ozempic or other treatments. Researchers compared nearly 53,000 Wegovy patients to the same number of closely matched users of other weight loss drugs. They found that during the first 6 months of use, first-time suicidal thoughts were reported by 0.11% of Wegovy users. That is compared to 0.43% of users of other drugs that do not belong to the same class as semaglutide. After taking other risk factors into consideration, the risk of first-time suicidal thoughts was 73% lower with Wegovy, the researchers said. No patient in the Wegovy group reported a suicide attempt compared to 14 users of the other drugs, the report said. Among patients with a history of suicidal thoughts, the risk of recurring suicidal thoughts was 56% lower with Wegovy than other weight loss medicines. similar patterns were seen for use of Ozempic compared with other diabetes drugs. The findings were consistent no matter the patient's sex, age, or ethnicity for both semaglutide types, the researchers found. Such a study cannot prove that GLP-1 agonists do not increase the risk of suicidal ideation, but the findings may reduce concerns. The researchers were unable to assess the statistical significance of differences in actual suicide attempts. The researchers noted that suicide attempts are critically different from suicidal ideations. Pamela Davis is a professor at Case Western Reserve School of Medicine in Ohio. She was one of the writers of the study. She said the growth in popularity of Ozempic makes it very important to understand all its potential complications. Suggestions that the drug may cause suicidal thoughts are not supported by this very large and diverse population in the U.S., Davis added. I'm Dan Novak.
Dan Novak joins me now to talk more about the Health and Lifestyle Report. Welcome, Dan.
Hi, Ashley.
Your report today was about a study on Ozempic and Wegovy that looked into whether the drugs are linked to suicidal thoughts. First of all, what are those drugs? They have gotten a lot of attention lately.
Yes, Ozempic and Wegovy are weight loss medications that have shown to be very effective, and they're quickly growing in popularity.
And they have the same active ingredient, correct?
Yes, they both contain semaglutide. Ozempic was actually originally made to treat diabetes, but semaglutide was found to cause fullness. In other words, it causes people to stop being hungry. And the drugs can cause really rapid weight loss. They have the potential to help a lot of people with obesity.
So what can you tell us about this study? Why was it done?
There were concerns that taking Wegovy and Ozempic brought about suicidal thoughts, but those concerns are not supported by this study. It's important to note that the study does not prove that the drugs don't cause suicidal thoughts, but the study does show that there is not a strong correlation or connection between taking the drugs and suicidal thoughts. So even though there's no proof, it may help reduce those concerns. The study is especially important because of the growing popularity of the drugs. As one of the writers of the study said, it's important to know all the drugs' possible complications.
Well, thanks for answering my questions today, Dan, and thanks for that report.
You're welcome, Ashley.
VOA Learning English has launched a new program for children. It is called Let's Learn English with Anna. The new course aims to teach children American English through asking and answering questions and experiencing fun situations. For more information, visit our website, learningenglish.voanews.com.
Welcome to the lesson of the day on the Learning English podcast. My name is Andrew Smith.
And my name is Jill Robbins. Thanks for joining us. Today's lesson will help you learn more about the English you hear in our video series, Let's Learn English. The series shows Ana Mateo in her work and life in Washington, D.C. Here's Anna introducing herself.
Hello, my name is Anna Mateo.
In today's podcast lesson, we're going to visit a beekeeper with Anna. She learns all about how to care for bees. And we learn about conditional statements in English. Those are statements with if and a modal, such as the words will or would.
But Anna has a little problem. She is afraid of bees. As Lesson 12 of Level 2 begins, Anna is sitting with Kaveh at an outdoor cafe.
Wow. Did you know that bees are dying?
That is bad news. If all the bees died, there'd be no food. Bees are very important.
Yes, they are. Speaking of bees, one of our little friends is here now.
You know, Anna, if you ignore it, it will fly away. But if you swat it, it might sting you.
I'll ignore it. I can ignore it. See? I'm ignoring it.
Anna, are you afraid of bees?
What makes you say that?
Anna, you should call my friend Caroline. She's a beekeeper and a bee educator. If you talk to her, she'll probably help you get over your fear of bees.
I'm not afraid of bees.
Here's her card.
Kaveh gives us our first examples of conditional statements here.
You know, Anna, if you ignore it, it will fly away. But if you swat it, it might sting you.
Notice that he uses the modal will. And this is what we call a type 1 or real conditional. That is when you talk about a real event and a result that will probably happen. The form is the word if plus a present tense verb followed by will plus an infinitive.
So the real event is Anna ignoring the bee, and the result is the bee flying away. That's easy to understand. Andrew, I hope we don't worry our listeners with all the types of conditional statements in this podcast.
No, don't worry. We're not going to do that. We're only going to talk about two kinds today, type 1 and type 2.
That's good. If we go back to the beginning of the conversation, we also hear Kaveh saying,
If all the bees died, there'd be no food.
That's a type 2 conditional, isn't it, Andrew?
Yes. Type 2 conditionals can have a possible event and a result that may or may not happen, or they can talk about something that is not real or imaginary. For example, I could say, if I were President of the United States, I would live in the White House. So here is the pattern. The word if plus a past tense verb plus a modal, such as would or could, plus the infinitive form of the verb.
So the bees have not died, thank goodness, but that part of the statement uses a past tense verb. Let's see if we can find some more examples and see how Anna does at the beekeeper's house.
I think I'm at the wrong address. This does not look like a place where bees are kept. Oh, sorry to bother you. I'm looking for beekeeper Caroline. I'm here to take her Learn to Love Bees class.
You're in the right place. I'm Caroline.
Oh, nice to meet you. Caroline, I thought this class used real bees and real hives.
It does. If you look in my backyard, you will see my bees. I'm a home beekeeper.
What? You live with bees? That is really amazing and at the same time really scary.
It's not scary. If you come, I'll show you.
Caroline, how many bees are in that hive?
About 30,000 in each.
Caroline uses the word scary. That means the same thing as frightening or causing fear. I think all of us have had to overcome fears at one time or another in our lives. I was also once afraid of bees, and then I learned that if I ignored them, if I did not bother them, they would not bother me. And I overcame that fear. How about you, Jill?
I was afraid to go deep underwater, but I learned how to do it the right way in my scuba class.
In the next part of the lesson, listeners, notice the way Anna and Caroline use conditional statements by listening for the word if. Anna is telling a story about why she is afraid of bees.
What? That's amazing. But aren't you afraid they're gonna come out and kill you?
Not at all, Anna. Even my children help me. Tell me, why are you afraid of bees?
I don't know. Well, when I was a little girl, my mom ran out of honey, and I really wanted honey for my pancakes. So I climbed high into a tree and hit a beehive with a stick several times. Then I reached inside with my bare hands to pull the honey out. That's when I got stung a lot. Caroline, if you hit a beehive with a stick and reach inside, you might get stung.
No, Anna, if you do those things, you will get stung.
Yes, I did.
And you know that it was your fault you got stung, don't you?
Yes, I did.
Bees know your feelings. And if you stay calm, the bees will be calm. If you're nervous, the bees will be nervous. And if bees are nervous, they may sting. So please, be calm.
I will be calm. I am calm. Okay, I'm ready. I'm ready.
Great, let's get our equipment on.
Okay, wait, I'm not ready. I'm not calm. I'm nervous. Give me 1 minute to be calm.
Be calm. That's the first step, isn't it, in overcoming our fears? I noticed that Anna uses might in one of her statements.
Caroline, if you hit a beehive with a stick and reach inside, you might get stung.
Yes, but Caroline corrected her. She is certain that bees will sting if someone hits their home with a stick.
No, Anna, if you do those things, you will get stung.
I think we should review our conditionals and give our listeners some practice now.
Good idea. I'll say a situation, then pause, and our listeners can try to complete the statement.
I'm ready, and I'll say what type it is after I finish the statement.
Okay, here's the first statement. If you go out in the rain without an umbrella,
you will get wet. Type 1.
If you feed a cat,
it will want to stay with you. Type 1.
If the sun didn't shine,
the earth would be very cold. Type 2.
And here's one more. If your car has no gas,
you won't be able to drive it. Type 1.
Good job, listeners.
Next time, we'll see what happens when Anna meets the bees at Caroline's house.
I think I can guess. If Anna stays calm, the bees will be calm too. Now, listeners, have you overcome a feeling of fear that you had when you were younger? Write to us and tell us about it at learningenglish@voanews.com.
And remember, you can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. I'm Jill Robbins.
And I'm Andrew Smith.
That's our program for today. Join us again tomorrow to keep learning English through stories from around the world. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak.
English, a daily 30-minute program from the Voice of America. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak. This program is designed for English learners, so we speak a little slower and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English.
On today's program, Katie Weaver and Andrew Smith tell us why a newly opened Hindu temple in India is facing criticism. Later, Dan Novak and Gina Bennett present this week's education report. Finally, John Russell has today's lesson of the day. But first,
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has opened part of a hotly disputed Hindu holy building in the northern city of Ayodhya. The temple stands at the former site of a 16th century Islamic holy building that Hindu mobs tore down 30 years ago. Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party and other Hindu nationalist groups say the opening of the Lord Ram Temple is central to their goal of reclaiming Hindu pride after centuries of suppression. Modi and his supporters hope the move will help the Prime Minister win a record third straight term in elections expected this spring. But critics accuse Modi of opening the temple too early, as much of the structure remains unbuilt. Opponents say the partial opening was a political act to gain voter support. And experts say the government-led opening ceremony marks a critical moment in India's history. They argue it demonstrates the weakening line between religion and state under Modi's leadership. India's founders considered the separation of religion and government to be a critical policy for national unity.
On Monday, the Prime Minister, dressed in traditional clothing, led the ceremony as Hindu clergy chanted hymns inside the temple. Nearly 7,500 people, including leading industrialists, politicians, and movie stars, attended the event. A military helicopter flew over the site, dropping flower petals on the crowd below. Our Lord Ram has arrived after centuries of wait, Modi said in a speech after the ceremony, receiving applause from thousands of attendees. He said the temple was built after countless sacrifices and is a testament to a rising India, breaking the shackles of slave mentality. January 22nd, 2024 is not merely a date, but marks the dawn of a new era, Modi said. Modi's government turned the event into a national celebration by organizing live screenings across the country and closing offices for half a day. Saffron flags, the color of Hinduism, flew in the streets of several cities. Government party workers had gone house to house in those cities to present religious papers to residents. Television news channels ran non-stop coverage of the event. Some movie theaters broadcast it live with complimentary popcorn. Many states declared the day a public holiday. In a rare step, stock and money markets were closed for the day. Modi has been the face of a new mix of religion and politics in India. Ahead of the temple opening, he set the tone by visiting numerous Ram temples over 11 days as part of a Hindu ritual. Hindus from across the country arrived to celebrate the opening. Groups of them danced to religious songs played from speakers along roads covered with flowers. Some 20,000 security personnel and more than 10,000 security cameras were deployed. Officials say the temple, a 3-level structure made of pink sandstone, is now open to the public. They expect 100,000 people to visit every day. I am here to see history unfolding before our eyes. For centuries, the story of Lord Ram has resonated in the hearts of millions, said Harish Joshi, who arrived in the city from Uttarakhand state 4 days before the ceremony.
But not all are celebrating. 4 important Hindu religious leaders refused to attend. They said opening an unfinished temple violates Hindu scripture. Some top leaders from India's main opposition Congress Party also boycotted the event, with many accusing Modi of using the temple for political gain. Neighboring Pakistan said a temple built on the site of a destroyed mosque would remain a blot on India's democracy. There is a growing list of mosques in India facing a similar threat of desecration and destruction, Pakistan's foreign ministry said in a statement. It urged the international community to help save historic Islamic sites in India from extremist groups and ensure that minority rights are protected. The estimated cost of building the temple is $217 million, all provided by public donations of money. The temple site spreads over almost 3 hectares, on top of the ruins of the Babri Mosque. In 1992, Hindu mobs attacked and destroyed Babri. They claimed it was built on temple ruins, marking the birthplace of Lord Ram. The mosque's destruction led to bloody riots across India that killed 2,000 people, mostly Muslims. The dispute officially ended in 2019, when India's Supreme Court called the mosque's destruction an egregious violation of the law. Still, the court ruled that the site would go to Hindus. The ruling provided another piece of land to go to Muslims. At least 3 historical mosques in northern India are involved in court disputes brought by Hindu nationalists. They say temple ruins lie beneath the mosques. Hindu nationalists have also taken action in Indian courts to seek ownership of hundreds of historic mosques. I'm Katie Weaver.
And I'm Andrew Smith.
It has become easy for students to find and copy published material. But copying another person's writing without giving them credit can get students and other scholars into big trouble. Copying another person's writing without crediting them is called plagiarism. Recently, the leader of Harvard University stepped down over problems related to the use of other people's work in her writing.
American copyright law protects original works of authorship, including books, movies, music, images, and artworks. The protection extends to computer software and the design of buildings and structures. The owner can sell a copyright or permit others to use it because it is property and property ownership is protected by law in the U.S. The idea is that copyright helps society. If people can gain from their own creations, called their intellectual property, then more people will want to create original works. The law, however, permits the unlicensed use of copyrighted works under what is called fair use. Fair use can include criticism, comment, news reporting, education, and research. However, there are some limitations. In education, students can include small parts of copyrighted work in their writing and research. But they must provide credit to the original creators through a citation which gives details about the source. Many universities, including Harvard University, even urge students to give credit to sources of ideas when they come from discussions with professors or other students. Harvard even warns students about copying themselves. That is, they cannot hand in the same work for more than one class without the permission of their instructors. A failure to do so is considered plagiarizing.
Just as it is easy to copy, it is also easy for professors to know if a student has plagiarized. First, there are computer programs and artificial intelligence, or AI, tools that compare students' papers to large databases of published writing. The programs can identify whether students have copied published writing. Second, if English is not a student's first language, a professor might recognize a change in wording and writing style. This could bring more attention to the student's paper. Plagiarism is punished in different ways. Professors could simply warn a student not to do it again, lower their grade, or they might fail the student in that class. In more extreme cases, a student may be temporarily banned or expelled from school. There are free tools to make citations easier for students and to avoid plagiarism. Zotero is a free open-source program that helps organize all the research a student may use. For example, it can automatically create citations and combine them into a list. The Purdue Online Writing Lab, or Purdue OWL for short, is another free resource. Many universities also have writing centers where students can learn the citation rules. And another way for students to learn how to avoid plagiarism is to read published papers and pay careful attention to how information is presented. Students should observe when and how citations are used. This can help them learn the rules of citations. In educational or academic writing, it is better to cite too much than too little.
Harvard's Claudine Gay resigned this month after several accusations of plagiarism in her academic work. Gay's academic writing got attention after she was strongly criticized for her answers to a congressional committee related to freedom of speech. Critics found several cases of possible plagiarism in her 1997 doctoral paper. Harvard's governing board first supported Gay, saying a review of her scholarly work turned up a few instances of inadequate citation, but no evidence of research wrongdoing. There has been debate among academics over whether her conduct amounted to academic dishonesty. D. Stephen Voss is an associate professor of political science at the University of Kentucky. He knew Gay when they were graduate students at Harvard. A paper he co-wrote in the 1990s was one Gay is accused of plagiarizing from. He said in an interview with the New Yorker magazine that Gay did plagiarize from him. But what she copied from his paper was trivial and inconsequential. What Gay used from his paper did not take an idea of any significance from my work. He added, the bit she used from us was not in any way a major component of what made her research important or valuable.
Roger Cruz is a psychology professor at the University of Memphis who is writing a book on the history and psychology of plagiarism. He told VOA in an email that if plagiarism is defined as taking words from another person's work, the opinion of Voss doesn't really matter. Cruz wrote in the online publication The Conversation that university students and professors might face different requirements when it comes to plagiarism. Cruz wrote that professors suspected of plagiarism may be given the benefit of the doubt by their schools. They may also be given the chance to make corrections to their published work. Cruz added that university leaders think that faculty members know what plagiarism is and how to avoid it. If a problem arises, administrators might think they were just being careless with their citations or use of quotation marks. Students, on the other hand, must follow university policies on academic behavior. Harvard, for example, warns that students may be forced to leave the college if they plagiarize. Work written by students is more likely to be closely examined and put through tools that identify plagiarism than faculty work. Many students consider this a double standard. Cruz wrote in an opinion piece in the Boston Globe that university plagiarism policies for faculty are unclear. How can academics set or enforce policies for faculty when the concept is so ill-defined? He asked. I'm Dan Novak.
And I'm Gina Bennett.
Dan Novak is here now to talk more about this week's education report. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Ashley.
Today's report was about plagiarism. One of the easiest ways to avoid plagiarism is to use citations. Can you explain what a citation is?
Yeah, so in academic writing or journalism, plagiarism is taking someone else's work or ideas and passing them off as your own. The way not to do that is to cite or credit the source where you got the information from. So if you listen to my story, I gave credit to multiple sources where I received information to write the story. I gave credit to the New Yorker magazine, I gave credit to Robert Cruz, I gave credit to the Conversation website. But if I didn't, I would be plagiarizing because I would be passing off the ideas as my own. In academic writing, which has different style rules, each piece of information taken from somewhere else must be cited and listed with the name of the author and the name of the article or book. Every source is then listed at the end in what is called a bibliography.
There has been a lot of attention on what Claudine Gray was accused of at Harvard. Can you fill us in?
Right, so Gay was accused of multiple instances of plagiarism in her academic work before she became the president of Harvard. She has mostly been accused of copying technical definitions and terminology from other scholars without giving credit.
D. Stephen Voss was someone she allegedly plagiarized from. He had an interesting take on the matter. What was that?
Yeah, Voss said that while Gay, as he said, technically plagiarized from him, what she took was unimportant. I should say that he does not support what she did, but Voss did say she has been overly criticized for her actions. But it's likely that her actions would have gotten her in trouble if she were a student. So it's a complicated situation. How plagiarism and academic dishonesty is defined going forward may need to change or be made more clear, because there aren't actually clear standards, especially when it comes to faculty.
Well, thanks again for today's report, and thanks for answering my questions, Dan.
You're welcome.
In this next report, Brian Lynn tells us about changes to shipping rules in the Panama Canal. We learn that reduced water levels have caused officials to take steps to limit ship crossings. Pay careful attention to the word tolls. We will talk more about it after the report.
Officials have ordered restrictions on shipping traffic in the Panama Canal because of reduced water levels. The latest restrictions limit ship crossings through the canal by 36%. The Panama Canal is one of the world's busiest waterways, linking the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. Canal officials have estimated reduced water levels could cost them between $500 million and $700 million in 2024, the Associated Press reports. The losses are linked to tolls shipping companies must pay to pass through the Panama Canal. The Central American nation is experiencing drought or extremely dry weather. The climate condition can slow traffic and reduce safety in the 80-kilometer canal. Panama Canal Administrator Ricarte Vasquez said the new restrictions reduce daily ship crossings to 24. The latest cut followed additional reductions last year. There were 38 crossings a day in normal times last year. Vasquez told the AP it's vital that the country sends a message that we're going to take this on and find a solution to this water problem. He added that in the first quarter of the fiscal year, the waterway saw a 20% reduction in goods and 791 fewer ships than during the same period the year before. Vasquez said the reductions were part of necessary control measures to make sure water levels remain high enough to permit at least 24 ships to pass daily. Officials are hoping the situation will improve in April when the new rainy season starts. Weather experts blame the drought on climate change and the weather system called El Niño. El Niño is a warming of surface temperatures in the eastern and central Pacific Ocean. This event usually causes hot, dry weather in Asia and Australia and can drive weather changes in other parts of the world. Vasquez warned that Panama must seek new water sources for both the canal's operations and drinking water. The same lakes that fill the canal also produce water for more than half of the country's 4 million people. The water problem is a national problem, not just of the canal, Vasquez said. We have to address this issue across the entire country. However, Vasquez told Reuters news agency he expects the waterway to meet its latest earnings targets, in part because of recent increases in tolls. I'm Brian Lynn.
Before the report, we asked you to pay careful attention to the word tolls. Can you remember when you heard it? You heard the term used in relation to payments that shipping companies must make. Let's listen again.
Canal officials have estimated reduced water levels could cost them between $500 million and $700 million in 2024, the Associated Press reports. The losses are linked to tolls shipping companies must pay to pass through the Panama Canal.
The word tolls is a plural noun. The singular form is toll. Let's take some time to work on the pronunciation of both forms. Let's take the consonant sound L. This is a voiced consonant sound, meaning that you should feel your vocal cords move when you say the sound. Repeat after me. L. 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 Now, let's include the vowel sound. Repeat after me. Ol. 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 Now let's include the first consonant sound. We will say the singular noun form together. Toll. 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 So, our singular noun is toll. The plural noun form includes one more sound at the end. Z. Repeat after me. Z. Z. Now we will say the plural noun, the noun you heard in the report. Tolls. 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 A toll is an amount of money that you are required to pay for the use of a passageway, such as a road, bridge, or a canal. In the report, you heard an example of how we might use toll, or its plural form tolls, to describe paying for the use of a canal. But how might we use the term toll in other situations, such as for the use of a road or bridge? Here are a couple of examples. You might hear a person say, "You have to pay a toll to use that road," or "Drivers who use that bridge have to pay a toll." In today's lesson, we learned how to pronounce toll, and we learned how to use it in common situations related to travel. However, you should know that the word has many other meanings. And that's the lesson of the day. I'm John Russell.
And that's our program for today. Join us again tomorrow to keep learning English through stories from around the world. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak.
English, a daily 30-minute program from the Voice of America. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak. This program is designed for English learners, so we speak a little slower and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English.
On today's program, you will hear stories from Dan Novak and Katie Weaver. Later, Brian Lynn presents this week's Technology Report. Finally, Jill Robbins and Andrew Smith bring us today's Lesson of the Day. But first,
a World Health Organization, or WHO, official who recently returned from the Gaza Strip said recently that the healthcare system is collapsing. He said more workers and supplies are needed. WHO Health Emergency Officer Sean Casey told reporters at the United Nations, "I've seen the healthcare system collapsing before my eyes." Casey spent 5 weeks in Gaza, starting in early December. While there, he met with medical professionals and patients across the territory. "I saw patients in hospitals every day with severe burns, with open fractures, waiting hours or days for care, and they would often ask me for food and water," he said. Casey said a ceasefire is needed, but he also said the ability to move people and aid supplies safely and quickly within Gaza would help ease suffering. Reports say Gaza had a strong healthcare system with 36 hospitals and 25,000 doctors, nurses, and specialists before Hamas militants attacked Israel on October 7th. Now, the WHO says about 15 hospitals are partially operating. That makes getting care difficult for the more than 50,000 injured people. Casey said there is a shortage of supplies, but also of workers. Many of them are displaced and struggling to survive and care for their own families. There are unbelievably brave health workers across Gaza who are staying and taking care of people because there is no one else to do it, he said. Casey was in Gaza to see how to bring in more international medical teams. He said getting supplies to northern Gaza is especially difficult. During the 5 weeks that he was there, his team was unable to provide supplies to the largest hospital in the north, Al-Shifa, for 12 straight days. At Al-Ali Hospital, also in the north, Casey said the situation was very bad. "I saw patients who were lying on church pews, basically waiting to die in a hospital that had no fuel, no power, no water, very little in the way of medical supplies," he said. Israel has accused Hamas of stealing aid supplies. Casey said he had not seen evidence of that during his hospital visits. "I have no evidence of supplies that have been delivered to hospitals going anywhere except to those hospitals," he said. Dr. Seema Jalani is an emergency health expert with the International Rescue Committee. She returned recently from a 2-week visit to Gaza with 5 British doctors. Jalani is a children's doctor who has worked in conflict areas, including Afghanistan, Iraq, and Lebanon. She said, "In my experience of working in conflict zones around the world, this is the most extreme situation I have seen in terms of scale, severity of injuries, number of children that have suffered that have nothing to do with any of this." Jalani worked in the emergency room at Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Bala, the only hospital in the middle area of Gaza. Jalani said she treated children who had lost arms and legs and who had extreme burns. After she left, Jelani said, the hospital ran out of fuel and the lights went out. She does not know what has happened to the babies she treated or whether they have been moved to a safer place. I'm Dan Novak.
A nonprofit group called Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists is again bringing attention to crises around the world with its Doomsday Clock. The group describes the Doomsday Clock as a measure of the risk of worldwide disaster. On Tuesday, the group kept its clock set at 90 seconds to midnight, the same position as last year. The group noted Russia's nuclear weapons activities during the Ukraine war, nuclear-armed Israel's war in Gaza, and climate change. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists considers midnight to be the point of total world destruction. The group says its clock is based on existential risks to Earth and its people. Those include nuclear threats, climate change, and technologies like artificial intelligence and new biotechnology. Rachel Bronson is the Bulletin's president and CEO. She told Reuters news service that keeping the clock unchanged from the year earlier does not mean that the world is stable. The group said on Tuesday that dangerous trends continue to point toward disaster. China, Russia, and the United States are all modernizing their nuclear weapons. The group said that increases the risk of a nuclear war through a mistake or misunderstanding. Russia's invasion of Ukraine began nearly 2 years ago and has increased tensions with the West to their highest levels since the Cold War. An end to Russia's war in Ukraine seems distant, and the use of nuclear weapons by Russia in that conflict remains a serious possibility. In the past year, Russia has sent numerous worrying nuclear signals, Bronson said. Bronson noted Russian President Vladimir Putin's February 2023 decision to suspend Russian involvement in the new START treaty with the United States. That treaty limited the nuclear supplies of the two countries. The United States and Russia together hold almost 90% of the world's nuclear weapons. Bronson also noted Putin's March decision to send nuclear weapons to Belarus and the Russian withdrawal of approval for a treaty banning nuclear tests. Russian expert Sergei Karaganov last year supported threatening to carry out nuclear strikes in Europe to frighten Russia's enemies. Alexander Glazer of Princeton University is a member of the group's Board of Experts on Nuclear Technology and Climate Science. The picture is quite bleak on the nuclear side this year, he said. Nuclear-armed Israel has been at war with Hamas since the Palestinian Islamist group, based in Gaza, launched attacks in southern Israel in October 2023. Bronson said the conflict risks becoming a big war in the Middle East. Climate change was added as an issue affecting the clock in 2007. Bronson noted that 2023 was the hottest year on record since satellite measurement of temperatures started in 1979. She also said fossil fuel emissions continue to rise. Bronson said that 2023 was a record-breaking year for clean energy, with $1.7 trillion in new investments. But fossil fuel investments also totaled nearly $1 trillion. Bronson called current efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions not enough. She said the results of climate change disproportionately affect the poorest people in the world. The Chicago-based nonprofit created the clock in 1947, at the beginning of the Cold War. The Bulletin was founded in 1945 by a group including scientists Albert Einstein and Robert Oppenheimer. I'm Katie Weaver.
A fake voice message claiming to be U.S. President Joe Biden was recently sent to voters in an example of possible election disinformation. The voice message is an example of what is known as a deepfake. A deepfake is a piece of audio or video created to make it appear that people in it are saying or doing things that they never did. Newly developed artificial intelligence, AI tools make it easier for people to make and publish such content. The fake voice of Biden was included in a political message sent by telephone directly to voters in the northeastern state of New Hampshire. This marketing method, known as robocalling, involves a machine that calls large numbers of people to play them a pre-recorded message. The calls are being investigated by New Hampshire election officials. The state recently held America's first presidential primary contest. Primary elections in the United States usually choose the candidates for the presidential election in November. It is not known who created the fake audio, which was heard by reporters from several news organizations. In it, Biden seems to try to persuade voters not to take part in the primary. The voice says voting this Tuesday only enables the Republicans in their quest to elect Donald Trump again. The message continues, your vote makes a difference in November, not this Tuesday. Voting in state primaries does not affect a person's vote later in the U.S. presidential election, which is set for November 5, 2024. The Biden robocalls even included language the U.S. president has often used in the past, specifically the phrase, "What a bunch of malarkey." The phrase is used to describe something foolish, unreasonable, or meaningless. The phone message advises listeners to save your vote for the November election. It is not known how many people received the call with Biden's voice. Biden did not campaign in New Hampshire, and his name was not on the state's primary ballot. This is because his campaign decided to begin the primary process in the state of South Carolina instead. However, a New Hampshire state law requires it to hold the nation's first primary. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre confirmed the call was fake and not recorded by the president. The campaign for former President Donald Trump said it was not involved with the call. The head of Biden's re-election campaign, Julie Chavez Rodriguez, said in a statement the organization was investigating the incident and actively discussing additional actions to take. Rodriguez said the robocall was a clear attempt to suppress voting and deliberately undermine free and fair elections. Robert Weissman is head of the nonprofit citizen activist group Public Citizen. He said in a statement the Biden robocall provided fresh evidence that the political deepfake moment is here. He urged governments to consider passing legislation to limit the use of deepfakes to prevent election chaos. Deepfakes created with AI technology have already appeared in campaign advertisements in the 2024 presidential race, the Associated Press, AP reports. The technology has also been used to spread false information during election campaigns across the world, from Slovakia to Indonesia to Taiwan. Hani Farid is a digital investigations expert at the University of California, Berkeley. He told the AP the Biden robocall demonstrates how AI methods can be weaponized in elections. Farid added that recent cases of audio and video used to mislead voters is surely a sign of things to come. As AI technologies improve, governments around the world are seeking ways to restrict them from causing public harm. The U.S. Congress has yet to pass legislation to limit the use of such technologies in the political process. The Federal Election Commission is currently considering public comments on a petition for it to restrict AI-created deepfakes in campaign advertisements. David Becker heads the nonprofit Center for Election Innovation and Research. He told the AP the use of deepfakes is just the latest tool in a long history of dirty tricks aimed at influencing the political process. Becker added that the goal of such efforts can be to confuse voters to a point where they no longer recognize false information from the truth. They don't need to convince us that what they're saying, the lies they're telling us, are true, he said. They just need to convince us that there is no truth, that you can't believe anything you're told. I'm Brian Lynn.
Brian Lynn joins me now to talk more about this week's technology report. Hi, Brian. Thanks for joining me.
Of course, Ashley. Thanks for having me.
Your report this week dealt with some fake audio of President Joe Biden that was sent in a political marketing call to U.S. voters. Is there any information yet on the source of this call?
At this point, no, there is not. The latest information I checked showed that the Attorney General in New Hampshire, the state where voters were targeted, is continuing its investigation into how this robocall was sent out. And investigators also want to learn who was responsible for creating it. As the report points out, though, this kind of audio would not be that difficult to produce, even by someone without high-level technical skills.
And if officials are able to identify a source for the deepfake, what action could be taken against the person or group behind it?
So, this is a very complex issue. Currently, there is a lack of laws covering the release of this kind of material. Some U.S. states have passed legislation to limit deepfake videos, particularly those that include obscenity, but only a few have legislation to restrict the use of deepfakes used for political purposes, and New Hampshire is not one of those. So experts so far are not clear about exactly what legal action could be taken against any individuals or groups found to be linked to this particular Biden robocall.
All right. Thanks again, Brian, for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ashley.
Welcome to the Lesson of the Day on the Learning English podcast. My name is Andrew Smith.
And my name is Jill Robbins. Thanks for joining us. Today's lesson will help you learn more about the English you hear in our video series, Let's Learn English. The series shows Anna Mateo in her work and life in Washington, D.C. Here's Anna introducing herself.
Hello, my name is Anna Mateo.
In our previous lesson of the day, we heard Anna going to visit a beekeeper, even though she is afraid of bees. In today's podcast lesson, we're going to hear her meeting the bees and learning how to care for them.
In Lesson 13 of our Let's Learn English Level 2 series, Anna and the beekeeper, Caroline, are putting on their gear to go and see the bees. Anna is afraid of bees, but like many wise women, she has decided to face her fear and try to overcome it.
I have a feeling that your fear of bees will be gone soon. There are things beekeepers do to protect ourselves. For example, we wear protective clothing. This is a beekeeper's veil, suit, and gloves. There are other things we can do, too. If I use the smoker, the bees will stay calm.
Let's use smoke. Lots of smoke.
Okay, Anna, that's enough smoke. Another thing you can do is stay calm. Okay, when I lift the frame, you will see the bees.
I'm ready. Let's do this thing.
Okay, let's put on our protective clothing.
As we mentioned in our previous podcast, this lesson is about conditional statements. We hear Caroline using a type 1 conditional in this part.
If I use the smoker, the bees will stay calm.
A smoker is a tool beekeepers use to burn a small amount of fuel. It produces cool smoke that distracts the bees so they don't pay attention to what the beekeeper is doing. It looks like a can with a pointed top.
The other new words we heard in this part describe the gear, or special clothes, beekeepers wear. Anna and Caroline put on a veil. That's spelled V-E-I-L, which is a kind of thin white net that covers a person's head. You can see through a veil, but the bees cannot fly through it.
In Western weddings, you might see the bride, the woman who's getting married, wear a veil over her face. The other gear they put on is a suit. It's also white and covers the entire body, so if the bees do get angry, they cannot find a place to sting you.
And finally, they put on thick gloves. These protect the beekeeper's hands not only from stings, but also from the heat from the smoker.
We should probably explain the word sting here. That is what we call a bite from an insect. Let's go back to Caroline's backyard now and see how they're doing with those bees.
Here we learn how the beekeeper handles the bees. Listen to see if you can understand the different kinds of bees Caroline describes.
I will carefully take out a frame. This is where the bees live. There are worker bees, drone bees, and the queen bee. The bees have different jobs. The queen bee lays the eggs. The worker bees collect nectar and pollen from flowers and bring it back to the hive. Then they make honey. Now you hold the frame. There are the bees.
There are so many, and they are so busy. Now I know why we say, busy as a bee.
Good job, Anna.
She said she first takes out a frame. That is a flat screen with wood around the edges. The bees live and work on the frame inside a box, which serves as their hive. Hive is spelled H-I-V-E, and it means the home of some kinds of insects.
Did you hear the kinds of bees? One is a worker. They are the ones we see flying around to collect pollen from flowers. That's the yellow dust inside the flowers that is food for the bees.
Right, and pollen is what makes some of us sneeze when there's too much in the air. The worker bees bring it home to their hive and make honey with it. Next, we have the drones and the queen bees.
I guess the queen is the big boss, right, Jill?
Yeah, that's because she's the mother of everyone. She lays up to 2,000 eggs a day. She just hangs around in the hive, and the worker bees feed her.
Wow. And what do the drones do?
They are just around to mate with the queen, so she can lay eggs. They might not even get to do that because the queen only needs to mate once. And here's a cruel fact of life. The worker bees throw the drones out of the hive before they close up the hive for the winter.
Wow, that is rough. The poor drones. But it seems Anna has overcome her fear of bees if she is close enough to see what's going on inside the hive. Let's listen again to find out how her attitude has changed.
Caroline, bees are beautiful and important. If I wanted to help the bees, what would I do?
Great question. You can plant native flowers that bees like. Here's a book to help you know which ones to plant.
Oh, it's a beautiful book. And look, it tells you which bees like which types of flowers.
It also tells you how the flowers affect the flavor of the honey.
Flowers make a big difference to bees. If they don't eat, they won't live.
Buying local honey also helps the bees. If you want to help bees, do those two things.
I heard some more conditionals there. Let's see if our listeners can identify this one. Is it type 1? That is with a present tense verb, or type 2 with a past tense verb?
If I wanted to help the bees, what would I do?
So that's type 2, right? The situation is possible, but it's not real yet.
Yep. Let's try another one.
If they don't eat, they won't live.
That's type 1. The situation is real.
And Professor Bott has an interesting comment. Remember, he's our little robot teacher in this series. He says,
I learned a lot about bees. Hey, if I worked with bees, I would not need protective clothing.
Well, that's true. Professor Bott is a robot, so the bees cannot sting him. That makes this a type 2 conditional. The situation is possible, and the main verb and the modal are both in the past form. But of course, we're not talking about the past time. The main verb is in the past form to indicate that it's a conditional, that it's not a real condition.
And I think we've learned a lot about bees as well as the conditional forms today. Write to us about your own experiences with bees. You can email us at learningenglish@voanews.com.
And remember, you can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. I'm Andrew Smith.
And I'm as busy as a bee, Dr. Jill.
And that's our program for today. Join us again tomorrow to keep learning English through stories from around the world. I'm Ashley Thompson. English, a daily 30-minute program from the Voice of America. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak. This program is designed for English learners, so we speak a little slower and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English.
On today's program, you will hear reports from Dan Friedel, Gina Bennett, and Gregory Stockel. John Russell presents this week's Everyday Grammar lesson. He then tells us about some pronunciation tips and tricks. But first, here is Dan Friedel.
A report from the United Nations says the Taliban are putting more and more restrictions on women in Afghanistan. The Taliban retook power in Afghanistan after the United States withdrew from the country in 2021. Taliban leaders said at the time they would permit women to be more involved in work, school, and public life than during their previous rule between 1996 and 2001. However, the UN says the Taliban's Vice and Virtue Ministry is cracking down on single and unaccompanied women. In one case, the UN notes, the ministry told a woman to get married if she wanted to continue working at a health clinic. The ministry said it was not right for an unmarried woman to have a job. The restrictions follow a pattern of the Taliban breaking their 2021 promise that life in Afghanistan would be more open to women. Girls are not permitted to continue going to school after 6th grade, for example. Places that cut and style women's hair have been shut down, and women who are not wearing a hijab, the Islamic head covering, have been arrested. In May of 2022, the Taliban said women should go back to wearing the religious clothing called a burqa. A burqa is a covering that only shows a woman's eyes. The UN's assistance mission in Afghanistan is reporting on the restrictions. The group's latest report centers on restrictions on women who leave home without a male guardian. There are no official rules about women needing to be accompanied by a male relative, but the Taliban now say women are not permitted to travel a certain distance away from their home without a man who is either their husband or a relative. The UN's report said 3 female healthcare workers were held by police in October when they left home without a guardian. They were only released when their families signed a document saying it would not happen again. In the Paktia province, the Vice and Virtue Ministry stopped women without guardians from entering health centers starting in December. The men from the ministry are now entering women's health centers to be sure that all women inside are with a male guardian. The Vice and Virtue Ministry is also known as the Taliban's morality police. Ministry workers have been going to bus stations, education centers, and other public places to make sure women are following their rules. They are looking for women who are not wearing head coverings and stopping buses to make sure women are not traveling without a male family member. Women are also being arrested for purchasing birth control, which the Taliban have not officially banned. Zabiullah Mujahid is the spokesman for the Taliban. In a statement, he said the UN report is filled with misunderstandings. He said the UN is ignoring or criticizing Islamic law, known as Sharia. Mujahid added that the Islamic government in power in Afghanistan must fully observe all aspects of Sharia for both men and women. I'm Dan Friedel.
Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, said Thursday that its first lunar mission landed within 100 meters of its target over the weekend. Japan became the fifth country to reach the moon when the Smart Lander for Investigating Moon, or SLIM, touched down on the moon early on Saturday. But trouble with the spacecraft's power system made it difficult to know whether it landed in the target area at first. Earlier moon landers targeted landing areas as large as 10 kilometers. However, with its improved accuracy, Japan's SLIM aimed at a target area of just 100 meters. Shinichiro Sakai is JAXA's project leader for the lander. He said, "We proved that we can land wherever we want." Sakai hoped that it would bring more missions to try to land on unexplored places on the moon. One of the lander's two main engines stopped working during the landing, causing SLIM to move 55 meters away from the target area to another position, Sakai said. Without engine trouble, he said SLIM could have landed as close as 3 to 4 meters from the target. However, the spacecraft could not produce power after landing. JAXA scientists said its solar panels might be facing the wrong direction. JAXA said it received all data about the touchdown within the 2 hours and 37 minutes before the lander lost power. Officials said there is still hope the craft will be able to recharge when that side of the moon enters daytime in the coming days. The power outage meant the lander's camera could only capture low-resolution images, JAXA said. The goal of landing within a target area of less than 100 meters led scientists to call SLIM the Moon Sniper. It used vision-based guidance that JAXA says could be a powerful tool for future exploration of the moon's mountainous areas. These areas might hold resources of fuel, water, and oxygen. Japan follows the United States, the former Soviet Union, China, and India as nations reaching the moon's surface. The mission was the result of 20 years of work on precision technology by JAXA. JAXA has experience with difficult space landings. Its Hayabusa 2 spacecraft, launched in 2014, touched down twice on the 900-meter-long asteroid Ryugu, Hayabusa 2 collected material that was returned to Earth for scientific research in 2020. In the past year, 3 lunar missions have failed. One by Russia's space agency, one by a private Japanese company, and another by a private U.S. company. However, more lunar landers will head to the moon this year. U.S. company Intuitive Machines aims to launch its IM-1 lander in mid-February. China plans to send its Chang'e 6 spacecraft to the far side of the moon in the first half of the year. And the American Space Agency NASA is planning its lunar polar exploration rover Viper for November. I'm Gina Bennett.
Croatian artist Tomislav Horvat is not the first person to make models out of matchsticks, but he might be creating the largest projects. A matchstick is the short, thin piece of wood that is used to make matches for lighting fire. Horvat thinks nothing of using 210,000 matchsticks to create a life-size statue or sculpture of a musician playing on a large piano. The instrument even comes complete with matchstick strings. But that was not enough for the 34-year-old from the northern village of Domasinet. He is just a year and a half away from completing his version of Michelangelo's sculpture of David. Michelangelo was a famous Italian artist who lived about 500 years ago. He created a famous marble sculpture of the Bible's King David that is in the city of Florence. I need another 30,000 matchsticks to finish it. That is, it'll need about 430,000 in total, he said. I've been working on it for 6 years. Horvat began making small models, but in 2013, he took on a larger project. He decided to create a life-size version of American actor Al Pacino as his celebrated character, Don Corleone, from Francis Ford Coppola's 1972 film, The Godfather. Sculptures that size would collapse without a supporting structure. He creates this additional structure from a material called papier-mâché or wood. The Pianist is his second work that is of a large size. His third is Desperate Man, which is made of 54,000 matches and took a year and a half to make. Horvat has shown his works in galleries in Croatia, including the capital, Zagreb. But they are not, for now, available to buy. I'm Gregory Stockel.
Scientist has started a Tempest in a Teapot by offering Britain advice on its favorite drink, tea. Tempest in a teapot is an expression to describe a strong, noisy, and angry reaction over something small or unimportant. Michelle Francel is a chemistry professor at Bryn Mawr College outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She said tea drinkers should add a little salt to make a perfect cup of tea. That advice is included in her book, Steeped: The Chemistry of Tea. The book was published Wednesday by the Royal Society of Chemistry. Mixing tea with salt water has never gone well for British-American relations. In 1773, American colonists in Boston, Massachusetts, were angry at Britain for adding more taxes to raise money. So they dumped British tea into the sea. The event became known as the Boston Tea Party. It led to the start of the American Revolution. Francel's suggestion caused outrage among tea lovers in Britain. They see Americans as coffee drinkers who know nothing about tea. And they think if Americans drink tea at all, they just heat water in a microwave. "Don't even say the word salt to us," said the etiquette guide Debretz on the social media service X, formerly known as Twitter. Even the U.S. Embassy in London joined the tempest in a teapot. In a social media post, it promised the good people of the UK that the unthinkable notion of adding salt to Britain's national drink is not official United States policy. Let us unite in our steeped solidarity and show the world that when it comes to tea, we stand as one, the embassy said in the post. The U.S. Embassy will continue to make tea in the proper way, by microwaving it, it added. The embassy later said that the post was a light-hearted play on our shared cultural connections, rather than an official press release. Francel's book Steeped, however, is no joke. The advice, its publisher said, comes from 3 years of research and experimentation with more than 100 chemical compounds. The book, the publisher added, puts the chemistry to use with advice on how to brew a better cup. Francel said adding a small amount of salt, not enough to taste, makes tea seem less bitter. This is because the sodium ions in salt block the bitter receptors in our mouths, she explains. She also suggests making tea in a warmed pot, shaking the tea bag around, and serving tea in a short and wide cup to keep the heat. And she says milk should be added to the cup after the tea and not before, another issue that often divides tea lovers. Francel has been surprised by the reaction to her book in Britain. "I kind of understood that there would hopefully be a lot of interest," she told the Associated Press. "I didn't know we'd wade into a diplomatic conversation with the U.S. Embassy."
VOA Learning English has launched a new program for children. It is called Let's Learn English with Anna. The new course aims to teach children American English through asking and answering questions and experiencing fun situations. For more information, visit our website, learningenglish.voanews.com.
Imagine you want to talk about the people in your country or in the world. In other words, you want to talk about a population. How might you do so? In today's everyday grammar, we will explore the noun population. You will learn important ideas about the term and how to use it in everyday situations. Let's start with a visit to the dictionary. If you look in a dictionary, you might wonder about two words that seem closely related. We have the noun population and the verb populate. Is it important to know about the verb populate, you might ask? Google Ngram Viewer permits us to examine words and phrases in thousands of books. We can get a good idea of how often individual words and structures are used. When we examine the frequency of population and compare it to that of populate, we reach a clear finding. The noun population is much more commonly used. Another way to understand the idea is this. You are much more likely to hear population in everyday situations. Population is a noun meaning the number of people, animals, or other living things of a kind in an area. We commonly use population as a countable noun. In other words, you can add an s to the end of population to get the plural form populations. So, you might hear or read the singular form population as in, experts expect the world's population to increase by a very small amount over the next year. We use the singular form because we are talking about all the people who live in the world, one very large group. How might we use the plural form? In this case, we might use other terms to clarify that we are talking about different groups. For example, you might read or hear something like this. Elderly and overweight populations face greater risk from the illness. In this case, we use the plural form populations because we are talking about all of the members of two separate groups, elderly people and overweight people. Now that we have explored the noun population, we should consider the word in terms of broader language situations. How do we commonly use the word population in everyday speech? Let's start by examining the most commonly used words that come before and after population. Since population is a noun, we might expect that determiners, words that tell us if a noun is general or specific, should be commonly used before it. Google's Ngram Viewer tells us that the word the is the most commonly used word before population. So, you are very likely to hear or read something like this. Experts said the population declined by 1%. And what about the most commonly used word after the noun population? We find that the short word of is the most common by far. So, you are very likely to hear or read something like this. The population of Japan is aging quickly. Over and under are two words that can be attached to population to form a new single word. Overpopulation describes a situation in which there are too many people. Underpopulation describes a situation in which there are too few people. Importantly, we generally use overpopulation and underpopulation as non-count nouns. In other words, there is no plural form. We do not add an s to the end of either word. How might you expect these terms to appear in everyday situations? Here are two examples. Experts predict overpopulation will result in food shortages. Experts predict underpopulation will result in labor shortages. In today's lesson, we explored a useful noun and how to use it in everyday situations. We will close our lesson with a call to action. Please answer the following questions in an email to learningenglish@voanews.com. What is the population like in your country or city? Is the population increasing or decreasing? In a future lesson, we can provide feedback on some of the writing that we receive. I'm John Russell.
You just heard this week's Everyday Grammar lesson. Now, John Russell joins us to talk a little more about it. Hi, John. Welcome.
Hi, Ashley. Thanks for having me on the show.
In the lesson, you mentioned that we often use population as a count noun, meaning it has a plural form. We make the word plural by adding an S to the end of the word. But why do we spell the word with an S, but produce a sound that is more like Z?
That's an important question. Let's pronounce both words, population and populations. Notice that the noun population ends with a N sound. Listen again. Population.
The ending consonant sound, N, is voiced. In other words, we can feel our vocal cords move when we produce the sound.
That's right. So if our last consonant sound is voiced, we use another voiced sound after it to make it plural. Remember, Z is voiced too.
So we can think of like going with like. Voiced consonants at the end of a word like to go with another voiced sound to make the word plural. So population goes with populations.
Yes, and that is why words like duck, words that end in a voiceless sound, have a voiceless consonant to show the plural form. Duck, ducks. K is voiceless and S is voiceless.
Well, thanks again for coming on the show to talk more about your lesson this week.
Thanks for having me. See you next time.
And that's our program for today. Join us again tomorrow to keep learning English through stories from around the world. I'm Ashley Thompson.
And I'm Dan Novak.
English, a daily 30-minute program from the Voice of America. I'm Dan Friedel.
And I'm Katie Weaver. This program is aimed at English learners. So we speak slowly, and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English. Today on the show, I have a report of some interesting facts about this year's Academy Award nominees. Gina Bennett tells about the word as. It may be short, but it has a lot of uses. And we close the show with an American story. The Fall of the House of Usher, Part 1, by Edgar Allan Poe, coming up. But first, here's Brian Lynn.
Scientists have mapped the largest coral reef off America's Atlantic coast. Researchers say the reef stretches about 500 kilometers from Florida to South Carolina. At some points, it is 109 kilometers wide. The researchers measured the reef using 3D mapping technology. It's eye-opening, it's breathtaking in scale, Stuart Sandon told the Associated Press. He is a marine biologist at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. Sandon was not included in the research. Ocean scientists have known since the 1960s that some coral life was present off the Atlantic coast. But the reef's exact size had remained a mystery. New underwater mapping technology made it possible to construct images of the ocean floor in 3 dimensions. The largest yet known deep coral reef has been right under our noses, waiting to be discovered, said Derek Sowers. He is an oceanographer at the nonprofit group Ocean Exploration Trust. Sowers and other scientists recently released maps of the reef in the publication Geomatics. The reef was found at ocean depths from 200 to 1,000 meters. Deep-sea life cannot use sunlight to carry out photosynthesis. Instead, reef corals at extreme depths must filter food particles out of the water for energy. Deep coral reefs are known to contain animals such as sharks, swordfish, sea stars, octopus, shrimp, and many kinds of fish. Unlike deep coral reefs, tropical reefs are better known to scientists and sea explorers alike because they are easier to reach. The world's largest tropical coral reef system, Australia's Great Barrier Reef, stretches for 2,300 kilometers. Sowers said it is possible larger deep-sea reefs will be discovered in the future since only about 25% of the world's ocean floor has been mapped in 3D. Only 50% of U.S. offshore waters have been mapped. Maps of the ocean floor are created using high-technology sound equipment called sonar on ships. Eric Cordes is a marine biologist at Temple University and a co-writer of a study on the mapping operation. He said deep reefs cover more of the ocean floor than tropical reefs, but both are currently facing similar risks, including climate change and damage from oil and gas exploration activities. I'm Brian Lynn.
Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences on Tuesday announced the nominees for Hollywood's highest movie awards, the Oscars. As usual, there were surprises. And there were snubs, meaning filmmakers or films that were rejected as candidates. Here are some of the facts about this year's nominees. Actor Jodie Foster was nominated for her performance in a supporting role in the film Nyad. It is her 5th nomination. The first came 47 years ago, when she was just 14 years old. This year, she returns as a nominee after an unusually long absence from the Oscars. Her last nomination was for Nell in 1995. Foster has won 2 Academy Awards as a lead actor. Her first came in 1989 for the movie The Accused. She won again in 1992 for the film The Silence of the Lambs. Her co-star in Nyad, Annette Bening, is also nominated for an Oscar in the Best Performance by a Lead Actress category. Like Foster, Bening has been nominated 4 other times, but she has yet to win any Academy Awards. Foster has more nominations than the rest of the actors in her category combined. Emily Blunt, Danielle Brooks, America Ferrera, and Divine Joy Randolph are all first-time nominees. Foster's gap between nominations is not a record, though. Last year, actor Judd Hirsch got his first nomination in 42 years for his performance in The Fabelmans. Music writer or composer John Williams is back in the running for an Oscar. The 91-year-old became on Tuesday the oldest nominee in history for his original score for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Williams broke the age record of 90 set last year by nominee John Williams. The composer has been nominated for 54 Academy Awards. He is the most Oscar-nominated living person. He needs 6 more to overtake Walt Disney's record of 59 nominations. Williams has won 5 Oscars. His last was in 1994 for the score of Schindler's List, which also won the award for Best Picture. A record 3 films directed by women were nominated for Best Picture: Barbie from Greta Gerwig, Anatomy of a Fall from Justine Triet, and Past Lives from Celine Song. But only one of them, Triet, received a Best Director nomination. Gerwig's snub, along with Barbie star Margot Robbie's in the Best Actress category, were widely protested after the nominations were announced Tuesday. But each is still in the larger group of nominees. Robbie is a producer who will get an Oscar if Barbie wins Best Picture. And Gerwig is nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. Director Steven Spielberg was a 2024 Oscar presence, even on a year off. Spielberg did not direct a movie last year that met time limits for Academy Award consideration. However, he is nominated as a producer of the movie Maestro. If it wins Best Picture, Spielberg will take home his 4th Oscar. Martin Scorsese, meanwhile, broke Spielberg's record on director nominations. Scorsese is nominated this year for the movie The Killers of the Flower Moon. I'm Katie Weaver.
VOA Learning English has launched a new program for children. It is called Let's Learn English with Anna. The new course aims to teach children American English through asking and answering questions and experiencing fun situations. For more information, visit our website, learningenglish.voanews.com.
Hello. This week on Ask a Teacher, we answer a question from Bill in China about the word as. Dear VOA, thank you for your high-quality American English teaching. The following sentence is from one of your recent news, and I can't understand a bit of it. Would you like to help me? And the comedy Poor Things upset summer hit Barbie as Hollywood threw its biggest party since labor disputes shut down much of show business last year. To be precise, I can't understand the part after as Hollywood. I think as Hollywood might be a reason to describe the part before. Thanks a lot. Yours sincerely, Bill Yang from Beijing, China. Thank you for writing, Bill. This is a very good question. The word as has many meanings and uses in English. In your example, as is a subordinator. Subordinators are used to join two clauses and add information. In this sentence, as shows that the events were happening at the same time. The movie Poor Things upset the movie Barbie at the same time that Hollywood threw its biggest party. Both things happened at the Golden Globes earlier this month. In addition to meaning at the same time, as can be used to establish a reason. I don't need to write it down as I trust myself. I trust myself is the reason I don't need to write it down. As can also be used to point to the future. For example, as you're coming to the station, you'll see a pub in front of you. In this sentence, as points to a future time. As is often used as a subordinator in many longer phrases. These phrases include as long as soon as far as. There are many other ways to use as in a sentence. It can be a preposition, part of a prepositional verb, and used with adjectives or adverbs for comparison. But we can talk about those meanings another time. We hope this explanation helps you understand the meaning of as in your example, Bill. Do you have a question about American English? Send us an email at learningenglish@voanews.com. And that's Ask a Teacher. I'm Gina Bennett.
You just heard this week's Ask a Teacher. Today, teacher Gina joins us. Welcome, Gina.
Hi, Katie.
In this week's program, we learned as can be a subordinator.
Yes, subordinator as can show at the same time, refer to a point in the future, or give a reason.
At the end of today's program, you mentioned that as can be used in other ways. Let's talk more about them now.
Great idea. As is a subordinator when followed by a clause or a group of words with a verb. But when as is followed by a noun phrase, it's a preposition.
So in the sentence, I don't need to write it down as I trust myself, as is a subordinator. But in the sentence, I was very serious as a student, as is a preposition.
Exactly. And as is used in prepositional verbs like serve as or act as. For example, the teacher serves as an example.
Is a prepositional verb like a phrasal verb?
A prepositional verb is similar to a phrasal verb because it is a verb plus a particle, but it's different because a prepositional verb is always followed by a noun phrase.
Okay, so preposition is followed by noun phrase. And then as can also be used with adjectives and adverbs, right?
Yes, as is often used with adjectives to show similarity. Like Washington is as hot as Tokyo in the summer. And as is used with adverbs to show extent or how much, like finish the project as quickly as possible.
Great. I'm glad we got to talk about those additional meanings in the podcast today, Gina.
Me too. Thanks for having me, Katie.
Fall of the House of Usher, Part 1. It was a dark and soundless day, near the end of the year, and clouds were hanging low in the heavens. All day I'd been riding on horseback through country with little life or beauty, and in the early evening I came within view of the House of Usher. I do not know how it was, but with my first sight of the building, a sense of heavy sadness filled my spirit. I looked at the scene before me, at the house itself, at the ground around it, at the cold stone walls of the building, at its empty eye-like windows, and at a few dead trees. I looked at this scene, I say, with a complete sadness of soul, which was no healthy, earthly feeling. There was a coldness, a sickening of heart in which I could discover nothing to lighten the weight I felt. What was it, I asked myself, what was it that was so fearful, so frightening in my view of the House of Usher? This was a question to which I could find no answer. I stopped my horse beside the building, on the edge of a dark and quiet lake. There I could see reflected in the water a clear picture of the dead trees and of the house and its empty eye-like windows. I was now going to spend several weeks in this house of sadness, this house of gloom. Its owner was named Roderick Usher. We had been friends when we were boys, but many years had passed since our last meeting. A letter from him had reached me, a wild letter which demanded that I reply by coming to see him. He wrote of an illness of body, of a sickness of the mind, and of a desire to see me, his best, and indeed his only friend. It was the manner in which all this was said, it was the heart in it, which did not allow me to say no. Although as boys we'd been together, I really knew little about my friend. I knew, however, that his family, a very old one, had long been famous for its understanding of all the arts, and for many quiet acts of kindness to the poor. I had learned, too, that the family had never been a large one, with many branches. The name had passed always from father to son, and when people spoke of the house of Usher, they included both the family and the family home. I again looked up from the picture of the house reflected in the lake to the house itself. A strange idea grew in my mind, an idea so strange that I tell it only to show the force of the feelings which had laid their weight on me. I really believed that around the whole house, and the ground around it, the air itself was different. It was not the air of heaven. It rose from the dead, decaying trees, from the gray walls and the quiet lake. It was a sickly, unhealthy air that I could see, slow-moving, heavy and gray. Shaking off from my spirit what must have been a dream, I looked more carefully at the building itself. The most noticeable thing about it seemed to be its great age. None of the walls had fallen, yet the stones appeared to be in a condition of advanced decay. Perhaps the careful eye would have discovered the beginning of a break in the front of the building, a crack making its way from the top down the wall until it became lost in the dark waters of the lake. I rode over a short bridge to the house. A man who worked in the house, a servant, took my horse, and I entered. Another servant of quiet step led me without a word through many dark turnings to the room of his master. Much that I met on the way added, I do not know how, to the strangeness of which I've already spoken. While the objects around me, the dark wall coverings, the blackness of the floors, and the things brought home from long-forgotten wars, while these things were like the things I had known since I was a baby, while I admitted that all this was only what I had expected, I was still surprised at the strange ideas which grew in my mind from these simple things. The room I came into was very large and high. The windows were high and pointed at the top, so far above the black floor that they were quite out of reach. Only a little light, red in color, made its way through the glass and served to lighten the nearer and larger objects. My eyes, however, tried and failed to see into the far high corners of the room. Dark coverings hung upon the walls. The many chairs and tables had been used for a long, long time. Books lay around the room, but could give it no sense of life. I felt sadness hanging over everything. No escape from this deep, cold gloom seemed possible. As I entered the room, Usher stood up from where he had been lying and met me with a warmth which, at first, I could not believe was real. A look, however, at his face told me that every word he spoke was true. We sat down, and for some moments, while he said nothing, I looked at him with a feeling of sad surprise. Surely no man had ever before changed as Roderick Usher had. Could this be the friend of my early years? It is true that his face had always been unusual. He had gray-white skin, eyes large and full of light, lips not bright in color, but of a beautiful shape, a well-shaped nose, hair of great softness, a face that was not easy to forget. And now the increase in this strangeness of his face had caused so great a change that I almost did not know him. The horrible white of his skin and the strange light in his eyes surprised me and even made me afraid. His hair had been allowed to grow, and in its softness it did not fall around his face, but seemed to lie upon the air. I could not even with an effort see in my friend the appearance of a simple human being. In his manner I saw at once changes came and went, and I soon found that this resulted from his attempt to quiet a very great nervousness. I had indeed been prepared for something like this, partly by his letter and partly by remembering him as a boy. His actions were first too quick and then too quiet. Sometimes his voice, slow and trembling with fear, quickly changed to a strong, heavy, carefully spaced, too perfectly controlled manner. It was in this manner that he spoke of the purpose of my visit, of his desire to see me, and of the deep delight and strength he expected me to give him. He told me what he believed to be the nature of his illness. It was, he said, a family sickness, and one from which he could not hope to grow better. But it was, he added at once, only a nervous illness which would, without doubt, soon pass away. It showed itself in a number of strange feelings. Some of these, as he told me of them, interested me, but were beyond my understanding. Perhaps the way in which he told me of them added to their strangeness. He suffered much from a sickly increase in the feeling of all his senses. He could eat only the most tasteless food. All flowers smelled too strongly for his nose. His eyes were hurt by even a little light, and there were few sounds which did not fill him with horror. A certain kind of sick fear was completely his master. "I shall die," he said. "I shall die. I must die of this fool sickness. In this way and no other way, I shall be lost. I fear what will happen in the future, not for what happens, but for the result of what happens. I have indeed no fear of pain, but only fear of its result, of terror. I feel that my time will soon arrive when I must lose my life and my mind and my soul together in some last battle with that horrible enemy, fear."
That's all the time we have for today's show, but join us again tomorrow for another VOA Learning English program. Thanks for listening. I'm Katie Weaver.
And I'm Dan. Welcome to Learning English, a daily 30-minute program from the Voice of America. I'm Dan Friedel.
And I'm Katie Weaver. This program is aimed at English learners. So we speak slowly, and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English.
Today on the podcast, we have a wide range of stories for you. We will go from Africa to Southeast Asia, then look at higher education in the United States. We will close the show with a conversation about the chilly or cold weather some people have been experiencing during the Northern Hemisphere's winter. Gregory Stockel joins us today to tell about the plans Australian mining companies have to start digging for lithium in Thailand. The metal is important for electric vehicles. Then, Jill Robbins and I have this week's Higher Education Report. We look at how a 40-year-old computer commercial made a difference to the field of study known as user experience. After that, Katie has this week's Words and Their Stories. We talk about words and phrases that go along with cold weather expressions. But first, here's Dan Novak with this story about rhinos in Kenya.
Kenya began its biggest rhino relocation project earlier this month. Workers began the difficult work of moving 21 of the endangered animals to a new home. They each weigh around 1 metric ton. A previous attempt at moving rhinos in the East African nation was a disaster in 2018. All 11 of the animals died. The latest project experienced early troubles. A rhino targeted for moving was successfully hit with a tranquilizer shot from a helicopter, but ended up in a creek. Veterinarians and park rangers held the rhino's head above water with a rope to save it, while a tranquilizer reversal drug took effect. It was then released. Wildlife officials have said that the difficult project will take time, likely weeks. The black rhinos are a mix of males and females. They are being moved from 3 conservation parks to the private Loisaba Conservancy in central Kenya, the Kenya Wildlife Service said. They are being moved because there are too many in the 3 parks. They need more space to roam and, hopefully, to breed. Rhinos generally spend time alone and are at their happiest in large territories. Kenya has had some success in saving its black rhino population. In the mid-1980s, the rhino population fell below 300 because of poaching, raising fears that the animals might go extinct in a country famous for its wildlife. Kenya now has nearly 1,000 black rhinos, says the Wildlife Service. That is the 3rd biggest black rhino population in the world, behind South Africa and Namibia. There are just 6,487 wild rhinos left in the world, says rhino conservation group Save the Rhino. All live in Africa. Kenyan officials say they have relocated more than 150 rhinos in the last 10 years or so. 6 years ago, Kenya moved 11 rhinos from the capital, Nairobi, to another sanctuary in the south of the country. All died soon after arriving at the sanctuary. 10 of them died from stress, lack of water, and starvation, which was worsened by salt poisoning as they struggled with saltier water in their new home, investigations found. The other rhino was attacked by a lion. Some of the 21 rhinos in the latest relocation are from Nairobi National Park. They will make a 300-kilometer trip in the back of a truck to Loisaba. Others will come from parks closer to Loisaba. Loisaba was once home to a healthy black rhino population before they were wiped out in that area 50 years ago, said Loisaba Conservancy CEO Tom Sylvester. Kenyan wildlife officials say the country is aiming to grow its black rhino population to about 2,000. They believe 2,000 would be the best number considering the space available for them in national and private parks. I'm Dan Novak.
Thailand hopes to start producing lithium from a mine in its southwest in about 2 years, government and business officials say. The mine could help the country become a center for electric vehicle, or EV, production. Lithium is a metal critical to EV battery production. Establishing lithium mines would put Thailand in a special position among major producers of the metal because the country is also developing an EV production industry. Chinese car makers already promised to invest $1.44 billion in that industry in Thailand. The Australian company Miner Pan Asia Metals is preparing to register for mining permits in March for the Riung Kiet project. The project is taking place in the country's Phang Nga area. The property could also include the proposed Bong Ai Tom mine. Pan Asia's leader Paul Locke told Reuters that the company is optimistic about starting lithium chemical production from Riung Kiet by early 2026. Thailand's Department of Primary Industries and Mines, or DPIM, predicts that the Riung Kiet site could produce about 164,500 tons of the metal. That would be enough to produce at least 1 million EV batteries of 50 kilowatt hours, said DPIM Director General Adidat Vasinonta. The official said mining could begin there in about 2 years. And Pan Asia's Paul Locke says the mineral resources at Bong Ai Tom might be 10 to 70% larger than Riung Kiet. Experts do not know how much reachable lithium exists in Thailand. Major suppliers of the metal include Australia, Argentina, Chile, and China. Thailand is Southeast Asia's largest automobile producer and exporter. It wants EVs to account for 30% of its yearly automobile production by 2030. Narit Turtsadira Sukdi is Secretary General of the Thailand Board of Investment. He said the government has supported 38 battery production projects, including those for EV use, with total investment at $659.4 million. Our goal is to push Thailand to become the regional hub for battery production, both for EV and for energy storage, he said. A regional hub is an important center of activity for a part of the world. The Thai government is also pushing for lithium exploration in new areas. That includes changing laws to permit private companies to study agricultural lands, Aditat said. One of the interested companies is Matsa Resources, an Australian miner looking for lithium in Thailand. Matsa holds 2 special permits to look for lithium in Thailand, and it has over 100 requests waiting, it said in January. They will be only one of a handful of countries that have got the whole supply chain from mining to production within the same country, said Paul Poli, Matsa's leader. The lithium under exploration in Thailand is found within a mineral known as lepidolite. It is more costly to process than the kind of lithium mined in Australia and Chile. Matsa and Pan Asia said they are in discussions with Chinese companies to process the lepidolite mineral. Chinese companies have experience producing lithium from lepidolite in Jiangxi province. I'm Gregory Stockel.
Many people first heard about Apple's Macintosh computer through a television commercial during the American football Super Bowl game in 1984. However, the commercial did not show a computer at all. It showed a woman throwing a hammer at a large screen. On the screen was a man giving a speech. The screen exploded, and an announcer said, "Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh, and you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984. 1984 is George Orwell's book about an authoritarian government, and Apple aimed to tell people that the new computer would be different. It would be easy to use.
Many computers at the time only did 1 or 2 things, and they required the user to type complex commands to start the programs. Jacob O. Woolbrook is a professor of information at the University of Washington. He wrote about Apple's commercial in The Conversation. Apple was selling a product for human beings to use, Woolbrook writes. After the commercial, he suggests, Apple became known for design, and the world started paying attention to the idea of user experience, or human-computer interaction.
The Macintosh was one of the first products to really prioritize user experience and focus on making something usable and understandable, learnable, even guessable, so that people didn't have to always read a manual to learn how to use it.
Mackenzie Bristow is a former language teacher and researcher who now works in user experience in Atlanta, Georgia. She said Macintosh was one of the first products to think about the user. What is the role of the person? What is the role of the user? She asked. She explained that in design, the rule is first understand the person before thinking about what the product looks like and what it can do. 40 years after the launch of the Macintosh computer, we now see computer screens everywhere, at restaurants, at airports, and even in cars. All of these devices have been designed by experts in user experience. Many colleges and universities now offer study programs in user experience. While it is part of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, Woolbrook said students from different areas of study, including psychology or communication, could be successful.
The kind of student that thrives in user experience is a student who has, above all else, a real curiosity about how people interact with technology. And students whose first language is not English can absolutely do well in user experience.
One of those students is Kartik Sundaram of India. He studied computer science at the University of Michigan and chose user experience for his graduate study. He finished last year and is now teaching the subject. I never felt like I had a personal desire to pursue computer science, he said. He called the work very isolating. For fun, he took a photography class. While in the class, he met someone who was studying in the User Experience Research and Design program.
He told me about how, it's like this blend of design and people and technology. And that kind of lit a fire in my heart to say, like, okay, this seems a lot more interesting. Let's jump right in. Let's learn more about it and let's apply to that school.
Sundaram said user experience is good for people who are personable and good at making connections. Some of those are called soft skills, he said. And the soft skills really matter. While he grew up speaking English, Sundaram said the world of user experience is more and more open to people who are learning English or who may speak with an accent. I don't think it's an expectation that your English is flawless, he said. Bristow said the ability to speak more than one language is kind of a superpower in user experience, because those people are comfortable interacting with many different kinds of people. That's really something to be celebrated, she said. Sundaram is teaching, but also looking for work in the field. Wobrock is a professor, and Bristow works on training programs for a large company. They each spoke about the need for user experience professionals to work in the expanding field of artificial intelligence, or AI. Sundaram said, "We're not going to be restricted to a text box in ChatGPT for much longer. There are going to be other ways to interact with it." Bristow said the ability to understand language is important. AI programs will need experts who understand how language changes based on where people live, their level of education, and their age. Wobrock said user experience professionals are starting to work on projects called human-AI interaction. There will be a great need for user experience professionals to help understand how people and AI can interact and work together in profitable ways, he added. But Sundaram warned that user experience study programs, also known as UX, are becoming very popular. He said some students see UX as a field to make a lot of money with few certification requirements. And several companies are letting go of people with experience in the field. Sundaram said, "It's definitely a difficult market, but it's an incredible field, and there are new interfaces coming out that need our work." I'm Dan Friedel.
And I'm Jill Robbins.
And now, words and their stories from VOA Learning English. On this program, we explore words and expressions in the English language. We give definitions, examples, notes on usage, and sometimes we use them in short conversations. In a recent science report, we explained about a weather system called the polar vortex. It caused a snowball effect on extreme weather around the world. The event led to record-high temperatures in many parts of the world. But much of North America had to deal with extreme cold. Some areas recorded temperatures as low as -20 degrees Celsius. In an earlier Words and Their Stories program, we explained how to use the expression snowball effect to describe a situation where one action or event causes many other similar actions or events. Are you thinking that there must be many more English expressions related to snow, ice, and cold weather? You are right. The term snowball effect is just the tip of the iceberg. Or, to put it another way, we have many more expressions in American English related to the cold weather. So, today we will explore some winter words and expressions. In the dead of winter, many people like to skate on frozen lakes. But watch out! You don't want to skate on thin ice. That is dangerous. If it breaks, you could fall into the cold, dark water below. You could even drown. So the expression skating on thin ice serves as a warning. For example, if a friend is always late to work, you might tell him he is skating on thin ice with his employer. But you might not want to say anything to your friend. Maybe it is none of your business when your friend arrives at work. So you decide to put your warning on ice. To put something on ice means to suspend action on something, a temporary halt. In fact, today a coworker asked me to put my project on ice so I would have time to help her with today's lesson. When we put food on ice, we preserve its quality for a time. We can wait to eat it later and it will still be good. What about when we break the ice, though? That sounds dangerous, right? However, it just means reaching out personally to a stranger. Like in this example.
Hi, Matt. Have you met our new teacher, Jennifer?
No, not yet.
Why don't you break the ice and introduce yourself this afternoon?
I certainly will.
Ice is not all we might face in winter. Sometimes the snow is so deep we cannot even get out of the house. At those times, you might say, "There is a snowball's chance in hell. I'm leaving home today." Hell is fiery and extremely hot. A snowball has no chance at survival there. So the expression describes something that is impossible. Now that we are stuck inside the house, we say we are snowbound or snowed under. And we often use snowed under to describe a situation in which we have too much work to do. American children usually love a snow day. That phrase is used to mean schools are closed. Students might spend the day outdoors, throwing snowballs or building a snowman. Or maybe they stay inside, covered up in a warm blanket next to a hot fire, snug as a bug in a rug. We use the expression snug as a bug in a rug to describe a soft, warm, and safe position or situation. Sounds like a great place to be, especially during a snowstorm. I mean, no one wants to be left out in the cold. That can really hurt, physically and emotionally. Sometimes we use this phrase, left out in the cold, when someone has rejected or forgotten us. We will never leave English learners out in the cold, to be sure, especially not in the dead of winter. And that's Words and Their Stories. I'm Katie Weaver.
I'm Dan Friedel, and you're listening to the Learning English podcast. We just heard Katie Weaver talk about phrases connected to wintry weather, and now she's here to share some more. Thanks for not giving us the cold shoulder, Katie.
Ha ha, Dan. Another popular phrase, the cold shoulder. That means to ignore someone on purpose. And thank you for not icing me out of the podcast chat.
In your report, you talked about the term cold snap, or a sudden, brief spell of cold weather. Isn't it interesting that people never use the term warm snap?
You are right. I have never heard snap used that way. I don't know why we don't. Right now in Washington, the weather is unseasonably warm. We are experiencing a sudden brief period of warmth. But we call that a warm spell, not a warm snap.
Katie, spell in this case, we should explain for our listeners, means a period of time, nothing to do with using letters to make words. You could also talk about heat by saying a heat wave, but usually that means a number of very warm days in a row. Katie, you must be glad that going outside today does not require a heavy coat.
True. I am enjoying this break from sweater weather.
And a sweater is a piece of clothing, often made of thick wool or cotton. They help keep you warm when it is cold outside. So if it's sweater weather, it is chilly. Katie, do you have any favorite sweaters?
I do, Dan. My husband's parents brought it back from Ireland as a gift to me. It is a very thick sweater made of pure wool.
Pure as the driven snow wool?
Dan, you have all the winter expressions out today. But yes, it is 100% wool, pure as the driven snow.
Can you explain what the word driven means? I mean, why not just say pure as snow?
Good question. I think it is because driven means the snow has just fallen or blown. It is yet untouched by people or animals. It's unmarked.
That sounds about right, Katie. Driven by the wind into fluffy piles of snow.
Anyway, the snow is all gone in Washington now. I'm going to head out for a walk, and you know what? I'm not even going to wear a coat.
Good for you, Katie. You can go sit a spell outside, listen to the birds, and enjoy the city's warm spell.
You got it. Thanks for having me on the show, Dan. What a blast.
And that's the Learning English podcast for today. Thanks, Katie, for joining me for that conversation. I hope we don't have too many cold days ahead. And thanks also to all of my VOA colleagues who worked on today's program.
Most importantly, thank you for listening. For more, visit our website at learningenglish.voanews.com. I'm Katie Weaver.
And I'm Dan Friedel.